When you think of wealth, what do you picture? Are you picturing like the mansion, the jet, the super bougie, Instagrammable vacation in a far flung destination? Yeah, maybe, but of course, there's a lot more to it than that. If you broaden that paradigm, broaden that definition, you might be folding in a whole bunch of other things that you, as an individual, would consider wealth. We're going to focus on that big question of what wealth is, what it means to you, with an author who has written a book called The Soul of Wealth. Daniel Crosby is our guest. He is Chief Behavioral Officer with Orion Advisor Solutions. He's in Atlanta, Georgia today. Hello there.
Hello, good to be back.
I looked it up in the dictionary. Wealth is defined as an abundance of valuable possessions or money. Uh, it is safe to say you think the dictionary definition could use some work, yes?
Yeah, I do think so. I think a lot of times people think of it just the way you talked about in your intro, but more modern research shows that it's a lot more than that. In fact, there's sort of five things that are sort of emblematic of true wealth.
And those five are, I'm waiting with great anticipation
So
here. Take me through them and then we'll dig down into each.
we're making great radio here, leaving the anticipation. So the first is positive experiences. This is fun, right? Going to the beach, eating an ice cream cone, going to the shore, whatever, right? Just fun, leisure. We understand that. That's part of our common conceptualization of wealth. The second one is engagement. This is deep, meaningful work or a hobby. The third is a relationships. This is the one that is most predictive of human flourishing. The fourth is meaning, working for something bigger than ourselves. And the last one is advancement, which is growth, personal achievement, being better today than we were yesterday.
There is so much talk about younger generations, at least younger than me, who are and have been very focused on positive experiences and fun. Is this the world just catching up to what they have known to be true for themselves for the last decade or so?
Well, I don't think there's been any shortage of emphasis on fun and leisure among any generation. Now, certainly the youngest generations love it and get that part right. But if that's all we focus on, which is often all we focus on when we're talking about wealth and what money can buy with respect to happiness, it's sort of one dimensional. And a lot of times, even when people prepare for retirement, they're preparing for that fun and leisure. The ideal is we're going to sit at that second home and have a life of leisure. We're going to golf all day or whatever. And true wellness and true holism is about a whole lot more than that, to include stuff like working hard and struggling and growing that I don't think we commonly conceptualize as a form of wealth.
Yeah. When we talk to retirement experts and longevity experts, they almost always flag the relationship dynamic and building this community, this web of people around you. How does that connect with some of the essays that you're publishing in this book?
Well, when you look at the Blue Zones research about sort of the nine factors that predict longevity, three of them are social. And a lot of the Blue Zones research, it points to things that you might expect. Places like Okinawa live to be centenarians because they eat a lot of seaweed and fish and healthy food and have an active lifestyle. But there's also places in Italy where they're smoking unfiltered cigarettes and eating processed meat all day, that are living to a ripe old age, and this has a lot to do with their relational ties. The way that they come together as a community, the way that they support each other. So relationships are, as impactful. And the lack of relationships, recent research has shown that people who are lonely, the physical impacts of social isolation are quite damaging. One study found it to be equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and
Wow.
twice as bad for your longevity as even obesity, which of course we know is a very big, big, bad, scary
Yeah.
thing. So loneliness is no joke.
What do you mean when you talk about meaning? That's a hell of a turn of phrase there. What do you mean about meaning? How does this fit in terms of your top five?
We can break down, so meaning is working for something bigger than yourself. It could be religion, spirituality, teamwork. But if we subdivide meaning, because meaning is one of these things that can be hard to get your arms around, it really comes down in the research to three B's: believing, belonging, and becoming, right? It's like, what is the truth you make about the world? Do you have a philosophical framework
Mm.
for making sense of the world? Do you have a group of friends, loved ones, or a community that helps you actualize that vision of the good life? And are you growing along the way? So again, it's back to some of those core tenets of, a vision for why life makes sense. What is your sort of life philosophy? Who are the people that are going to help you get there, and how will you grow and change along the way?
I noticed when you used the word advancement, you talked about advancement, but you also talked about growth. What are the less monetary areas in which people would, feel validated about their push for self-actualization that is outside of career advancement, salary, like all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think becoming a better partner, becoming a better parent, becoming a better guitarist, learning how to write a book. 80% of the world wants to write a book. A vanishingly small percentage of them will ever complete that. So, sort of whatever your personal idea of the good life or your personal project is, getting better and sharpening that saw some of the most interesting research I found in the book is that people who are committed to growth,
Mm.
even though they're usually not doing it for this reason, they see an accompanying bump in pay. So men who go to therapy make almost 13% more than men who don't. It's about eight.
What? I
Yeah,
have never heard that stat before.
yeah.
Wow.
It's about 8% for women who are not quite as messed up as men, but
Right. I think that rings true. Yeah.
yeah.
Now,
So 10% between genders. People who have a mentor were more likely to get promoted. People who went back to school, of course, see a host of positive sort of vocational and career outcomes. So that's not necessarily the reason that you do it, but investing in yourself can pay some of the biggest dividends of all.
Uh, you, of course, are grounded in the paradigm of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We talk about it on this show. We have a personal finance version of that we call the priority pyramid. Some of our listeners have a hard time latching on to a topic that really lives at self actualization versus how am I putting a roof over my head given what has happened to mortgage rates over the course of the last 24 months? How do you toggle between the world of, oh my God, yeah, it'd be so great to have meaning in my life, and where is the money coming from for groceries?
Yeah. So, Gandhi said to, I'm paraphrasing, but to a poor person, bread is God. Once
Mm.
if we don't have that warm place to stay and enough food to eat, it's kind of hard to think about love and self-actualization until we get those things met. That said, I think for a lot of middle class and upper middle class folks, they keep moving the goalposts so that that love and that self-actualization and that next thing seems out of reach, where their lifestyle is just creeping up alongside their earning potential. So now it's private school for the kids, or the luxury car or the bigger house, and then they complain about where's that next dollar coming from. Well, you're living pretty large. So I think there are a certain subset of people for whom that is a legitimate complaint. There is a larger group of people who are living outside of their means and using that as an excuse to play it safe, to play
Mm.
small, and not be all that they could be, because they need to cut their lifestyle back, candidly.
You have kind of a sacrilegious comment early on, and it is this statement: money can buy happiness if spent well. Are you even allowed to say that? I mean, the legal liability you have exposed your publisher to for just printing those words strung together in that way. What do you mean?
Yeah, so it's interesting. A lot of the old research, right? A lot of people are familiar with the $75,000 study, which would now
Yeah.
be about $100,000. And what they're measuring there, they found that happiness plateaued after about what would be about $100,000 US today. And what they found there is they were measuring happiness with respect to sort of the absence of pain. And that is true because at about $100,000 US, you can eat healthy food, live in a warm house, and not hear gunshots at night. I mean, that's sort of like the worst of life is off the table, the dangerous, uncomfortable parts. But there's another study that found that for about 30% of people, happiness actually accelerates over $100,000 a year and is up and to the right, all the way to $500,000 per year,
Wow.
which is where it topped out. If you ask people just about their subjective self-appraisal, so if it's just like, "Hey Bruce, how you doing?"
Mm.
That's up and to the right the whole time. And so it matters how we measure happiness. The research shows that there's also about 15% of people who are never happy at any income level, and we've all met those people, and they just have different problems. And wherever you go, there you are. And
Mm.
whether you're rich or poor or somewhere in between, for 15% of the population, their problems and their sadness is non-financial, and they
Mm.
need to look for non-financial cures for that. The final thing I'll say is if you look at something like buying a car, buying a fancy car, most of the time that buys very limited happiness. Because if I buy a Ferrari, I quickly get habituated to it. That quickly just becomes my car. Maybe my wife hugs me a little tighter the first two times I drive it home, but then it's kind of old news. And so that car doesn't buy much happiness. But the research also shows that if I buy that Ferrari to join the exotic car club of Toronto, then
Mm.
it does buy me happiness because now I have a group of friends I can meet with on Saturday and compare notes with and drink coffee with and go on vacations with. So if we pair some of what doesn't work with some of what does work, we see something magical. And so things like getting out of work we hate reliably buys happiness. Buying back time, buying back freedom from things we
Mm.
dislike buys happiness. Spending time with people we love buys happiness. So it's complicated and it's nuanced, but an absence of money absolutely buys misery. And once you get north of that, it's more about how you deploy it than whether or not it's good or bad, without context.
Our guest is Daniel Crosby. He is the author of The Soul of Money. He's a behavioral scientist by background. And there's a really lovely interplay, Daniel, in your book about the science and the research and the quotes and the qualitative comments that really resonate and ring true. There's one area that I want to move to, and that is around giving. What is some of the research that points to what any fundraiser will tell you? Giving makes you feel good, but the research would say that's accurate. It's not just them trying to get you to give a buck or two.
Yeah. When I wrote The Soul of Wealth, I wanted the ideas to endure. I wanted people to be able to read this book 50, 100 years from now and still have it be pertinent. So I looked for things that were true across faith and wisdom traditions. So if you look in the Tao Te Ching, Bible, Quran, Bhagavad Gita, wherever you want to look, they will all have some sort of mention of giving money away makes you richer. And from
Mm.
a mathematical perspective, that makes no sense. But when you dig into the research, we find that it's really true. That in one study, we found that the level of financial contentment was best predicted by two variables. The first was how much money does someone have, of course, like that's predictive of sort of how wealthy they feel. But then the second variable was how charitable were they? And those things were equally predictive. So how
Mm.
charitable you are is as important as how much money you have. And if you look at a normal like bell curve distribution of people's financial, well-being, you find that at every point along that continuum, there are people who feel wealthy. They may be in the 10th percentile for wealth nationally, but they feel wealthy because they are generous. And one more thing the research found that I thought was interesting, and the fundraisers can use this free of charge. Uh, we found in the research that kids as young as 2 have this sort of warm glow that comes from giving money away. but it has to be costly. It has to be costly giving. It has to hurt a little bit.
Mm.
So if you are not feeling this warm glow, you may not be giving enough. So maybe give a little more of yourself and your time as well.
Yeah, the fundraisers would love to hear that. True.
There they
I
go.
want to move on to another big theme in your book, and the quote that sort of it surrounds is freeing yourselves from the shackles of what other people think. And you set up this extraordinary example of this eccentric named Tesla. Of course, we know that name because of cars these days. But what do you think? How do you think that relates to people's living of their lives today?
Well, I speak about it in really two contexts. One is in an investment context. We know that people herd, and we know that people engage in sort of this herd-like animalistic behavior where we sort of follow each other and we buy and sell at all the wrong times. So, sort of divorcing yourself and your opinion from the broader chatter is sort of one context in which I talk about it, which is, I think, well trodden territory. The thing that I think is more interesting was that in the book, I found that 27% of people had gone into extreme debt to impress someone else. So think about that. 27% of people had gone deep into debt with the explicit aim of showing off. And 77% of them said they regretted it. And I bet it's really 100. It's hard to get people to be honest about that stuff. But yeah, I mean, so a quarter of us go deep into debt to show off for our friends and neighbors, and almost everyone regrets it. So it really is a powerful thing to learn to run your own race. That's sort of a theme that appears throughout the book. And I go back to Morgan Housel's idea. He calls it the man in the car paradox. When we see someone in a nice car, we don't go, "Wow, that guy is awesome." We say that car is awesome. Like we want to see ourselves in the car. We don't think anything, our opinion of the person in the car is not raised one iota. In fact, we think they're probably obnoxious.
Yeah.
So a not a great way to ascend to the heights of esteem in the eyes of your friends, and it gives us a lot of regret.
Okay, one more quote here. Not being dumb beats being brilliant. This resonates for me in particular because of the subtitle of my first book, Why Smart People Do Dumb Things and What You Can Do About It. What are some of the dumb things that people should avoid?
Yeah, when Morningstar looked at the best predictor of fund performance, it's fees. Like everyone wants it to be something complicated. It's paying too much. So overpaying for investment product is one dumb thing. Under diversifying, failing to get the appropriate level of support and advice. It's really just these unsexy sort of basic things. And I talk about tennis in there as among a couple of examples. In the pro ranks of tennis, they say that points are won, right? Like one player outshines another. But sort of anything south of Wimbledon, points in tennis are lost basically by mistakes. And I think that the same thing applies to investing. There's not many investors. A vanishingly small percentage are going to be great, right? It's probably not you if it's like 5% of the population, which is about what the studies suggest. And even among Ivy League educated white shoe Wall Street types, 5% outperform the market. Probably not going to be you or me. But we can be great at avoiding mistakes, and you can avoid a handful of mistakes and do very nicely.
Very interesting stuff. There are 50 essays in total. Daniel, we've just touched on a couple of those ideas, but it's really an extraordinary book. Thank you for joining us to talk about it today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
The book is called The Soul of Wealth. Its author is Daniel Crosby. He is a psychologist and behavioral finance expert, as well as the chief behavioral officer at Orion Advisor Solutions.